I will bear true faith and allegiance to the people of Guyana. I will faithfully execute the office of President.
On August 2, 2020, Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali was sworn in as Guyana's 9th executive president. It was 5 months to the day when Guyanese went to the polls. Finally, the long wait was over, and although there were smiles all around, there had to be sighs of relief, not only from the new president and his supporters but from allies and friends of this emerging South American oil giant.
Elections will be held on the 2nd of March.
Elections in Guyana are always a clear contest between the PNC, now under a new name, the APNU, and the PPP. The PPP, having lost narrowly in 2015, was hoping for a return to government. There was much at stake. The next government of this impoverished nation would control the vast revenues expected to pour from its offshore oil deposits, estimated to be in the billions of barrels. It was called the mother of all elections, and Guyanese across the country flocked to the polls. The day was mostly trouble-free, and the body responsible for a smooth and efficient polling day, the Guyana Elections Commission, came in for high praise.
Competitive. Contestants could campaign freely, and election day was well managed by the election administration.
The Commission concludes that the March 2nd, 2020 poll was free, fair and transparent, and the mission expects that the results of the poll will reflect the free expression of the will and aspirations of the Guyanese.
Everyone was in praise of Election Day, and Guyanese were beginning to feel proud of their political maturity.
We went around, we were travelling around several of the regions. We saw what I think was a good process. It was a process that worked the way it was meant to.
I'd like to commend GCOM on a very professional and dedicated system yesterday.
But, within 24 hours, in this building, the office of the Returning Officer for Region 4, Guyana's largest electoral district, the process began to unravel, and for the next 2 weeks, the free will of the Guyanese people was held hostage, and democracy hung on a precipice.
I have never seen such a barefaced, ugly, and deliberate attempt to rig an election.
Those results lack credibility.
We know our rancher. We know our Nagamudu.
The United States is closely monitoring the tabulation of votes in Guyana.
To the end, and if they cannot be addressed, then why not a recount?
So how did we get from here to there? To understand the undercurrents of the March 2020 elections and the political moving parts that nearly derailed the process, we need to take a brief look back at Guyana's dark and troubled elections history. Guyana's modern political history began with the emergence of Dr. Chetty Jogan. A young East Indian dentist, he trained in the USA and returned to British Guiana in 1943 and began a populist movement to improve the working conditions of the rural poor, living mostly in the agricultural belt. He was soon joined by his American-born wife, Janet Jogan, and then by a black London-trained lawyer, Forbes Burnham. They formed the People's Progressive Party. The PPP won the elections of 1953 but were soon deposed by the British. The PPP soon split, which began a schism in Guyana's politics, with blacks supporting Burnham and East Indians behind Chetty. This racial divide still pervades present-day politics. The PPP won the next 2 elections, and in the height of the Cold War and after a spate of violence and hate that tore the country asunder, Chetty was deposed in 1964. Guyana became independent in 1966. With Guyana's politics race-based and East Indians a majority population, Burnham and his successor Desmond Hoyta would rig the next 4 elections that allowed their party, the PNC, to remain in government for nearly 3 decades. Chetty remained in the political wilderness. That all changed circa 1990. The end of the Cold War saw a shift in the global geopolitics and a new American foreign policy. Former President Jimmy Carter came to Guyana and exacted election reform from then-President Hoyta. In 1992, with the first free and fair post-independence elections, Chetty, now in his late 70s, returned to power. Chetty died in office in 1997. The PPP won the next 4 elections and remained in government for 18 years before they were unseated in 2015. One of the electoral reforms of the 1992 elections was the counting of votes at the polling place. When the polls closed, the ballot boxes were emptied and each ballot was counted in the presence of polling agents from the contesting political parties. This count was recorded on a document called the Statement of Poll or the SOP. The statements of polls became an integral part in preventing ballot stuffing and tampering with ballot numbers.
And the record of how people voted that day is on a document called the Statement of Poll. That's the only evidence, except for the ballot paper, that exists about what people wanted, what was their intent, what was their will.
The election laws instructs that the presiding officer of each polling station provide official copies of statement of polls to the party polling agents. These SOPs are then taken back to each party office. The SOP also became a critical element in making the process more transparent, and a tool to quickly and publicly determine the unofficial results. This was acknowledged by the Chief Elections Officer Lowenfield during a presser on the day after the elections.
Right now in Trinidad and Tobago, where there is a social media post on the basis of which people are celebrating and sending congratulations. There are numbers that have been published saying that the PPP Civic has won the election and people are heralding the new president. How do you respond to that to an audience in Trinidad and Tobago?
And U.S. media will know that, and those results will not be official if a media house, for example, would have gone through the process of obtaining results by polling stations and do their collation. They will arrive at an unofficial position of who would have won and who would have lost.
So if a media house and the public can do an unofficial count based on the SOP, as it stands to reason that the political parties should be in possession of unofficial results within hours of the close of polls.
Loaded all the statements of poll and our tabulation for Region 4, and we allowed people, independent, anyone, the media could have tabulated themselves.
She come conducted the election cleanly. We won the election, we have our statement claims.
We, based on the SOPs that we have won the elections.
It is clear from all the numbers that the People's Progressive Party Civic have won this election convincingly.
Now, we believe we won too, from our state of the polls.
The Representation of the People Act also allows that a copy of the statement of poll be made public by affixing on the exterior of the polling station. The presiding officer is also required to provide the returning officer and the chief election officer with official copies of the statement of polls. These statutory documents are presented at the RO office in sealed envelopes and are to be opened by the returning officer in the presence of persons entitled by law to be in attendance. Section 84 of the Representation of the People Act: the returning officer shall, in the presence of such of the persons entitled under Section 86, 1, to be present as attend, ascertain the total votes cast in favor of each list in the district by adding up the votes recorded in favor of the list in accordance with the statements of poll. In the 10 districts this procedure was proceeding smoothly despite a few hiccups.
Declaration of all coastal areas. That is to say regions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. Here at Region 4, for example, there's a plan that the process would have commenced on or about 11 p.m. There were some administrative issues.
Despite these issues, the CEO was upbeat and preliminary results were trickling in, even from Region 4.
We move across to District 4. we see the APNU AFC, Anna with 89 votes. The APNU AFC with 12,681. We have Change Guyana with 6.
The verification process in Region 4 continued all day on Tuesday. The SOPs of Georgetown were verified, then Mingo halted the process around 9:45 p.m., saying he was tired. The process of the verification of SOP was to resume on 9 a.m. on the next day. The verification process did not resume that morning. Mingo fell ill and was taken to the hospital. It was then that the problems started, but no one had any inkling that the country was in for some extraordinary events.
Started the verification of the statements of poll for Region 4. So they had gone through quite a few, and then at about 2 a.m., unexpectedly they stopped. They said they would resume this morning. Now the process that was used was the RO would call out the statements of poll, their numbers.
And what the process is, it's not a counting process. It is a verification process. That what they have written on their statement of polls is in conformity with what the main political parties have written on their statement of polls. So this public exercise which should take place should be a verification from the statement of polls. What has started this afternoon is that GCOM commenced verification from an unverified sheet of paper.
So they did not restart this morning. Then we heard Mr. Mingo fell ill. And then at 1 p.m., they resumed this with a spreadsheet.
Clerk to the returning officer was advised to continue the process. The process of verification commenced in earnest at probably 2, I can't recall the exact timing. And during the process, some errors were discerned.
23 places that they called out. In 17 of those, they had APNU with at least 100 more than that are on the statement of poll. So
the spreadsheet of unknown origin had errors that added votes for the APNU, but why would GCOM resort to a spreadsheet? The deputy CEO Roxanne Meyer said it was that in the interest of expediency a spreadsheet would be used to continue the ascertaining of the votes. But most likely the reason resided in the numbers. Not just known to the stakeholders but to the general public, all day long the other districts were bringing in their official declarations.
Region 4 began using the statements of poll and did 421 places using that record of how people voted, and there are 879 boxes. What became very apparent was that the APNU is not doing as well as they were telling people they wanted to do or that they needed to do to win.
AFC, valid votes cast, 23,800.
Total of 43,220 votes.
APNU to catch up with. They are claiming 18,000 votes in the lead. That is before Region 4 has been counted. If you look at the 2015 figures, APNU won Region 4 by about 40,000, 43,000 votes. So if the PPP now, by the existing count, excluding Region 4, are ahead by 55,000, they're ahead by about 53,000. Even if you rely on the 2015 figures, APNU can't catch up.
And all of a sudden, the statements of poll got tossed aside, and the returning officer and his staff started using a spreadsheet.
The suspicion is that that is why the decision was taken not to use the statements of poll for the verification process, but to go back to some kind of summary database, data sheet that was created.
When the RO Mingo fell ill, the spreadsheet was worked on in his absence, as he attested in his affidavit on March 11. When I took ill, Georgetown was finished except 5 statement of polls that had queries, and we had East Bank of Demerara and the East Coast Demerara to do. I was informed by Ms. Michelle Miller that in my absence the clerks inputted the data for the East Bank and the East Coast Demerara. There was a complete input of all the data for District 4 at around 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday under the supervision of the senior clerk, Michelle Miller. That I was informed by Michelle Miller and verily believed that all the data for District 4 was inputted into the computer by the 4 March, 2020. I was duly informed by the said Michelle Miller and verily believe that the information inputted into the computer as aforesaid was extracted from the statements of poll for District 4 and the information was inputted into the computer onto a spreadsheet.
Now, when they restarted, Mr. Lowenfield told everyone in the room, and he told the media and the observers, that they are going to start doing the right process, which is using the statement of polls, and they will not stop until they're finished.
So the Commission, Madam Chair, and Commissioners deliberated, and we agreed at the end of the day, of the evening, that we will do the verification using statements to statements. So I take out my statement, you bring your statement, we go through the numbers on the statements, and we will continue the process commencing with East Bank, then the East Coast, and whatever residual statements we have for Georgetown. Once that process is completed, and we're working to finish, there will be a declaration for Region 4, as has already happened in all the other districts.
Now, everyone has made arrangements to be here all the time. Then we took a break for about 15 minutes because they said, you could get something to eat and drink for a while. When we came back from the break, we did about 4 more statement of polls, and then the clerk that was doing it announced that we're going to break until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
I am just stunned. Commitment was made to start and finish this thing tomorrow morning, non-stop. We expected that GCOM and the person of Lowenfield would have had rotational staff that would work from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock.
And could we close off for the night? Now I should state for the record that when we restarted the process, the GCOM CEO had said the process would continue unhindered until the entire of Region 4 was counted. We all agreed to this, and we all agreed to a long night. So what there seems to be is that the CEO has made one commitment, but there seems to be no internal arrangements for replacement staff. In that period of time, the SOPs were taken out of the room. The governing APNU AFC coalition packed up and left because they were in agreement with, closing off for the night.
When I came back and I heard so, I just left and
What was the reason given to you?
I don't know. There was an adjournment.
Are you satisfied with the process as is?
I don't know why it's necessary anyway. But
Mr. Williams, would you have agents here to continue the process tonight?
No, but I'm satisfied or not. I came in this morning, so I started the verification for the East Coast to be a campaign manager for the APNU AFC. And we haven't reached the East Coast. I understand there was some backlog with Georgetown, and then they moved to East Bank.
Well, are your party agents prepared to continue for the rest of the night?
But I don't know. I don't see anybody here. I just came back. I haven't seen anyone.
You don't have party agents here?
No, I don't have party agents here. I don't see anyone here. So I don't know what you mean by party agents. I'm the party agent.
The persons to sit in the verification process.
But I don't see anybody in there. So I wasn't here. You knew I left.
No, you haven't seen anybody in there, but would you be in favor of the process continuing throughout?
But how can you continue the process and there's no one there?
Would you ask for them to come?
Ask for them to come?
Yes. So the process can go throughout.
Well, to when was it adjourned?
About
9 in the morning, they said.
Oh, it's good time.
Why the process cannot start? We have a DRO here. DRO is ready to proceed with the process. What is the hindrance from this DRO proceeding with the process of this time? You said earlier that you wanted this process to continue all night until it's completed. We have the DRO in position now. What is the holdback now? What is the holdback?
I'm saying to you that I see you. It is my desire to utilize a DRO from 4 belonging to these banks.
If I were to tell you what just happened, you won't believe, because I don't actually believe. We've been waiting for about 2 hours for a DRO to be here so that the count could resume. A DRO is here and has been here for some time. We were waiting on Mr. Lowenfield to get back. Mr. Lowenfield now says it's not his desire to use that DRO. I don't know which DRO he wishes to use. The law provides that a DRO conducted. His desire doesn't factor into the law.
Clearly, the role of the CEO is to facilitate the process, to ensure that the process is concluded in a timely manner, in accordance with law, and with the integrity of the process intact. What we are witnessing here is that the person who has that responsibility seems to be undermining, frustrating, and defeating that process. And that leaves one to wonder. Returning officer includes deputy returning officer, meaning that whatever functions the returning officer can perform, the deputy returning officer can do so. But it's clear that there is an intention to delay these results while a sinister plot is being facilitated, hatched, and being executed.
I just want to let you know that I was happy to accredit your OAS, Commonwealth, EU, the different teams. I was happy to...
That Thursday morning, the process stalled. It was then that the Foreign Minister Karen Cummings came to Ashman Building and spoke to the foreign observers. She was vague and desultory, but it soon became apparent.
Carter Center to have accredited you because it came under my ministry, Foreign Affairs, with the blessings of the President to have accredited you. So that's the first point I want to make, and I'm happy to do so. Secondly, you would know that I say, this pastor want to say hello and to, I don't know if you want to say.
No.
Yeah, but because I, if I can be myself, one person says this, but they heard something, I don't want to repeat it here because of ethical reasons. And they said, if you have to take away the accreditation, do so. But I said, no, we can't do that. So I said, let me just...
What? That's what you said.
I'm saying, I told you I wasn't in agreement with that. So please listen to me.
I speak on behalf of the Commonwealth, the largest concentration of people in the world.
Yes.
And I am not going to have, not me, the Commonwealth disrespected by a threat to take away the accreditation of the Commonwealth. I just think.
Everyone was stunned, but outrage followed. Owen Arthur, of the Commonwealth Mission, showed his displeasure by taking off his badge. Across town, the leader of AFC Kamraj Ramjatan was declaring victory.
We, based on the SOPs that we have won the elections, and the PPP does not want to concede that, although they themselves have those SOPs.
More drama was to follow as the Ashman Building was evacuated when someone called in a bomb scare. But the events became more dramatic as a recuperated Mingo returned. And he had a surprise.
We were all told when we left, Ms. Lowenfield said that at 9 a.m. this morning, we'll reconvene the process of verification. We'll start with the East Bank. When we have completed the East Bank, a summary sheet will be printed. Every party will agree to that. Then we'll move to the East Coast, then Georgetown.
East Bank, we're about halfway up the bank. And Tomorrow we'll complete the bank and move on to the East Coast.
What time are you guys?
I said 9 later on in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The CEO disappeared this morning. Disappeared. No one knows where he is. The process was hijacked, I would say, by the DCEO. When we came this morning, we were sitting, waiting. Nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. The deputy CEO then came into the room and said that, okay, the process will start. We waited another long time, over 2 hours, and then Mr. Mingo appeared in the room and tried and refused to do the process, the verification process, wanted to proceed with a declaration.
Roll the cameras.
No illegality. No illegality.
How do you allocate votes along with the journals?
They are declaring a win for the APNU without confirming Region 4. This is fraud.
Shame on you, man.
Mingo, after announcing that he had a declaration to make, then left, leaving behind a stunned and bemused room of observers.
What is this? Thieving on election.
It soon became ugly, a messy shouting match. And it nearly descended into fisticuffs.
Every day I come here, I avoid y'all.
I know.
Don't say what your nonsense. You have a problem with someone.
No problem.
You take it out there. You come and
Mingo, after a couple of hours, reappeared on the third-floor balcony and read the declaration, amidst loud shouts of "No! No!"
The PVP. So, Mr. Mingo has decided he will not speak.
Of the verified statements of poll, where APNU got 114,000. They now have APNU at 136,458. So they added 22,000 to the APNU's column, and where the PPP was 80,000, now it's come down to 77,329.
And I went home, and I believe that this is the most defining moment. It was the game changer. I went home, and I wrote out in my handwriting an application. I didn't have a typist, me and my driver alone, Riaz Holadar. I didn't have a typist or anything. Wrote with my handwriting. Call a judge and ask him if he would hear an urgent application on my behalf orally. The judge was reluctant. I persuaded him, point out the law to him, all on the telephone, to hear me. And I went to the court and I made the application. He asked me to walk with me, an order of the court. By that time, I got a junior lawyer to come with me, and he typed out the order that I wanted from the court, a draft order. I presented the oral arguments, and the judge granted the oral order in writing, because I can't go and serve an oral order. I had to get that order. And that was the order, in the name of Riaz Holadar, that stopped Mingo. And I got several copies of that order, picked up the marshals from the High Court, and walked into Splashman Building with that order. That process was never completed. So how can you have a declaration without you're declaring what you have verified, but you never verified anything, or you never complete the verification of anything. So an order was granted restraining the declaration until that procedure is complied with. The second injunction is a mandatory one. It compels the returning officer to comply with that section and to conduct and complete that verification exercise and then make the declaration.
The non-appearance of the GEOCOM chair Claudette Singh fueled rumors of a hostage situation. The excessive amount of police in the building, closing off all access to the chair added fuel, and once more Ashman building became chaotic.
Police officer, the officer chairman has been murdered. They kicked down the door to get to the woman and they murdered the woman. We go in and tell the crowd.
We saw some medics come in. They went up with oxygen upstairs, and then they were denied entry by the police. So we sought to find out what's going on. Then Inspector Narain came, and he said that Claudette is like his mother, and she called him and said she's feeling unwell. So apparently he called the medics to go into the room to come and see her, but they were prevented. So he tried to go up to see her. The police were prevented.
Basically what happened that night is that got pushed in, went in the door, and pushed in the other door. It was a room within a room. Pushed in that door, and I saw Miss Claudette Singh there. She had about 15 to 25 persons in there with her, some in plain clothes and some in their police uniform. And she was standing at the back. She was looking very frail, she was looking very weak. The room was very, very hot. Yeah.
Are you hurt, Chairman? Come on. Come on, get out there.
The Carter Center, one of the primary observer groups, gave a scathing rebuke of Mingo's numbers.
So what we've seen today, up until today, as you know, the Carter Center has commended the GECOM and has said the process was a transparent process. Yesterday and into today, the transparent verification of the results from District 4 was stopped. And the fact that there was no transparency about the results that were ultimately announced today means that those results lack credibility. We don't know, and no one else can verify that the results that were announced are the correct results or not. We just don't know. And we don't know because there was no transparency in the process for announcing those results. We saw
position, right? And some persons put their hands up to ask questions of him, but that was not allowed to happen.
The tabulation process has been completed. Is that why?
Well, apparently that is no. Well, I guess for GECOM, I don't know. That's what we have to hear from him, because he came and, as he explained, he was going to make a declaration. If we have questions.
The APNU candidate Volda Lawrence faced the press and gave garbled responses to their questions.
But he didn't get to even finish.
You're using this word declaration. For clarity, what do you mean by this?
He was going to read out, as far as I know, the meaning of that in these circumstances, that he was going to give you the results for the various constituencies in Region 4. Okay. Right? And so we need to ask him questions.
But they were not, or the verification process was not complete.
No, let us get it straight, sir. We can't say that. He has to explain to us, sir, whether GECOM has done that. What they have been doing with us is allowing us to participate in another verification process. You understand? So he will have to tell us how they arrive at this, what did they do, what was the procedure they used, and so on, and then we can make our claims. But we can't be shouting and then want the people to do the same thing.
The region itself has not declared. The region is Region 4 has not declared.
And that is what he came to do, from what he said.
Without verification.
I don't know, you have to ask him that.
You understand me? This is a GCOM process. That's what we keep quiet. This is a GCOM process.
How and why her signature appeared on Mingo's official document, a GCOM document, is a mystery. More confusing is, she kept insisting it is a GCOM process. President Granger apparently accepted the numbers declared by Mingo and at APNU campaign headquarters gave a victory speech to loud cheers from his supporters.
Tonight, APNU and AFC have come to tell you thanks. Over the next 5 years, we are going to make life better for you.
For questions, you're aware of the circumstances.
It was a more somber tone at the opposition press conference. They voiced their concerns and placed their case in the court of public opinion and diplomatic pressure. Meanwhile, at Ashman Building there was a show of force. Riot police evicted the few remaining observers watching the SOPS.
Has left, he said he will go with what our order is. Please take your rubbish and leave.
So we have heavily armed ranks that are...
Leave, arrest them. If you fail to leave, watch. When the people have to go to the place, these are people go, yeah, just walk them out. Just walk them out.
The Ashman Building was closed. The request for a recount was denied and then events took a more violent turn. March 6th is the death anniversary of Chetty Jogan and the supporters of the PPP came out in force. However, protest became violent. A bus with schoolchildren was stoned. Police shot a young man wielding a cutlass. With the country perched on a precipice, Joseph Harmon was ready to swear in Granger.
All of the results for the 10 electoral districts are in now. The last was the results for District 4, which is East Coast, Georgetown, East Bank, Demerara.
APNU was determined to swear in Granger as president. They were aided by the alacrity of Lowenfield, who despite the injunctions now moved to complete the process.
To the Chancellor of the Judiciary, who will then act upon that to have the president sworn in.
The matter now headed to the courts. The Chief Justice determined she had jurisdiction in the matter and trial was set for the 11th of March.
She led this country out of an abyss.
We know our Ranger! We know our Nagamudu!
Finally,
at the end of the day, the only official documents that the returning officer can consider are the statements of...
With the Chief Justice quashing the Mingo numbers and ordering him to use the statement of polls, everyone headed back to the Ashman Building, but this time only one representative for a group was allowed.
When we started this morning, Mr. Mingo read his rules and regulations for how we will proceed. Subsequently, we started the count. First he said we will start over from 4001, and then the APNU objected, and then he said we will start over from 4041, where we ended the night. I think it was Wednesday night or Thursday night. So we eventually started back from 4001, and the process started.
And we actually thought that we were going somewhere. He then attempted to use the spreadsheet.
The numbers I have on my spreadsheet are the numbers that are extracted from the original statement of polls that were issued to me. In whose presence? No, those are my statement of polls. Mine. Arrived at these broadsheets, I took each statement of poll, input it into our computer, tabulated them, and come up with these broadsheets.
The spreadsheet, he was not accompanied by any statements of poll. When queried yesterday whereabouts of the statements of poll, he said they were in the building, and he undertook and gave an assurance that he'll have them there shortly. In fact, we saw him make some requests to have those spreadsheets come, and then shortly thereafter he abandoned that undertaking, obviously getting instructions from someone else.
Life, considerable life and career in and out of politics in this country. I have never seen such a barefaced, ugly, and deliberate attempt to rig an election.
When the Chief Justice in her ruling yesterday recognized that he's the master of this process. After lots of back and forth discussions, he said he was going to take a 10-minute break, but he insisted that he was going to use the spreadsheets. Before taking that break, we inquired of him whether it was the same spreadsheet that was complained about last week, and he indicated in the positive. Yes, it was the same spreadsheet, and you'd recall in the affidavits that he swore in support of his defense to the matter before the Honorable Chief Justice, he indicated that those spreadsheets were prepared by someone other than him in his absence.
After vociferous objections on the use of the spreadsheet, the chair of GCOM suspended the tabulation for the day.
So, you would have known by now that I served contempt of court and notice of an intention to institute contempt of court proceedings against Mr. Mingo.
On Friday the 13th, the process resumed with more controversy as Mingo remained defiant.
There, and two young ladies were proceeding at breakneck speed.
4058, Anna 0, APNU plus AFC 163, 163. CG 2, she said 163, LJP 0, PPPC 71, PRP 0.
There is a screen there that has a spreadsheet on it, and they were simply calling out numbers at a fast rate of speed that would render it almost impossible for anyone to follow what they were doing.
The foreign envoys walked out in disgust.
I attempted to intervene, they ignored me. Then Mr. Mingo emerged from I don't know where. He said that he was coming into the room for the first time, but persons who were there said no, he was seated there, and he left and then he came back. Anyhow, he reported, to preempt what I was going to say, he says that he's now there for the first time after coming from the court, and he's...
Anil Nandalal is complaining for everything, even though there is no merit in his complaint. What is going on at GCOM now? Mr. Lowenfield has computed the votes from the statement of poll, and he has it on a spreadsheet. Now he's using this spreadsheet, he's calling numbers, and then he's putting on the screen the numbers as well as the statement of poll to reflect that. But Mr. Nandalal, they want it is either Nandalal and Gunraj and Robeson Benway or no way at all, and that's not the law.
If there's discrepancy, I would say they will be addressed at the end, and if they cannot be addressed, then why not a recount? Therefore, too, yes, box by box.
I'm going to give instructions now based upon what the Chief Justice said. He then proceeded to say that they are moving to another location, the headquarters of GCOM, where the exercise will be resumed from where it left off, and a projector will be used with scanned documents.
The Chief Justice could not have been more explicit in her ruling of Wednesday. Notwithstanding, we found that there was blatant non-compliance with what the Chief Justice said in her ruling. And then, today, having gone back to the Chief Justice understood the issues so well, and she asked, why are persons being allowed to view the statements of poll? Simply.
After we moved to Kingston, and as Josh said, the results was being displayed on a piece of cardboard covered with a bed sheet. We thought that it was totally, unsatisfactory for a count to be executed in such a way.
In that structure and prior to this afternoon should disturb us all. There were clear indications that the numbers on those sheets after scan were altered. Sometimes, at least in some instances, I cannot remember specifically which ones, but in some instances the numbers on the sheet represented more than the voters that were present.
Officer, please help me in this situation.
You are wrong. You are wrong. Your reputation will not be tackled in this country. Your reputation, Mr. Lingo. Your reputation.
0, LJP 0, PCC 246, PRP 0, PCI 0, PIN 0, URP 0, 55.
Thank you for raising me. I will take no further part in this fiasco. I won't.
Sir.
You shut up. You are in the
Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance to Change, 130,289. For the People's Progressive Party, 74,877.
A quick note from South America, and then I'll take some questions. The United States is closely monitoring the tabulation of votes in Guyana, the election took place back on March 2nd. We joined the OAS, the Commonwealth, EU, CARICOM, and other democratic partners in calling for an accurate count. We commend CARICOM's role in seeking a swift democratic resolution, and it's important to note that the individuals who seek to benefit from electoral fraud and form illegitimate governments, regimes will be subject to a variety of serious consequences from the United States.
APNU, we met with the leader of the opposition, Barrett Jagdeo, as well as the members and the presidential candidate, Mr. Irfan Ali, and other members of the executive of PPP. We also met with the representatives of the small parties. We met with the election observers. And then again, we met with the president and Mr. Jagdeo very late last night, early into the morning, together in order to be able to chart a process forward.
The recount was undertaken and the resultant statement of recount mirrored the statements of polls held by the parties. It revealed that Mingo's spreadsheet was fraudulent. After several court battles, President Ali was eventually sworn in on August 2nd, and in his later inauguration speech he promised electoral reform and holding to account those who pushed the country to the brink in those dark and chaotic days of March 2020.
All of us are painfully aware of the trauma and anguish that our people endured over the last 5 months, as vigorous attempts were made to destroy our democratic credentials and deny the will of the electorate. All of us have an obligation to the nation and to ourselves to ensure that never again should any generation of our people be subjected to such unlawful behavior. Therefore, a review of events related to the electoral process over the last 5 months will begin shortly in order to determine forensically exactly what transpired and to hold accountable any person who sought to pervert and corrupt the system. More importantly,
We will pursue the necessary reforms to make our democracy stronger and our electoral process more transparent.